Because you mentioned invisible mental illness, although there are some outward signs that you may be able to notice, but that's the thing about mental illness that it's inside, it's internal, it's invisible. So therefore people might stay silent. They might stay silent because of the shame or because of the stigma. So for you, since you're talking about your own personal experience with mental illness, did stigma ever stop you? And if it did, how did you break through that?
Stigma stops me every day, right? Like, I think that's what, just because you understand the stigma does not mean that you can actively combat it daily, right? Um, we think about stigma internally. It's like, what happens when I acknowledge that I have a depression or if I have
Hmm.
anxiety or a mental illness? And it's so
Yeah.
many different things. One, I get two different aspects. Oh, you don't look sick to me. I'm not really sure how
Hmm.
that's supposed to look.
Because you're
Uh,
functioning well.
because I'm very high functioning, extremely high functioning, does
Ah,
not mean I don't slowly die inside. So just because you can
gotcha.
put this face on doesn't mean that things aren't hard from day to day.
Welcome to Journey to Joy Live, a podcast to promote wellness, resilience, and joy while providing mental health awareness and breaking down the stigma of mental illness in the Black community. I'm your host, Dr. Joy, and today I bring to you episode 46, Acceptance in the Shadows of Stigma. And I'm excited that I have today a very special guest, Jewell Gooding, the Executive Director of Silence the Shame. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Very excited to have a conversation about this today.
Yes, because it is Mental Health Awareness Month. Hopefully,
Yep.
we are just uh, annoying people with that because
Mhm.
that is the plan for May. So,
Absolutely.
introduce yourself. Tell everybody about who
Yes.
you are.
Absolutely. So I am Jewell Gooding. I am the executive director for Silence to Shame. I've just spent over 24 years or so in mental health. I have practiced as a licensed clinician. I have worked for state government, public policy. A large part of my work was working with child welfare, foster care, juvenile justice, and really working with children and families. As it relates to mental health care and accessing behavioral health services. So, just kind of had a very eclectic
Hmm.
background as far as professionally. And then personally, for myself, I am a person with a mental illness. We battle depression and anxiety every single day. And I'm also a parent of children with mental illness. My middle son has social anxiety, so that's always fun. And then my youngest son has attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. So yeah, we are just a family who figure out lives and ways on to make sure that we are empowering our wellness and ensuring that we are connecting to others in a way that makes the most sense.
Wow, thank you so much for that transparency because episode after episode, I'm always promoting that. Speak up, speak out. Let's get comfortable talking about uncomfortable things and just being authentic and talking about our own struggles. Even yesterday on the podcast, I was talking, or last week at this point on the podcast, I was talking about my struggles with being overwhelmed and stress and anxiety and history of depression. And I've had many, many people as guests speak about their own personal mental health trials and struggles because
Yeah,
that's the point. It's here, it's prevalent, it is around. So
absolutely.
tell me, is this pretty much what got you into mental health in general? And then how did you get into Silence the Shame?
Yeah, so yes, I am a survivor of childhood trauma. So that's always fun. And where we kind of think about just our experiences. I was born on the south side of Chicago. So, when we think about adverse childhood experiences, those are those negative things that happen to us
Mhm,
in our childhood that we don't necessarily heal from, right? And some of that for me was, again, living in a household with a parent with an undiagnosed mental illness, as well as community violence and going to school, for me. And living in that, you don't necessarily know you're experiencing trauma, right? But once you are removed from that situation and you look at the impact that that has on you, you can absolutely look at a lot of the decisions and
mhm.
engagements, interactions, and relationships of that trauma response that I had learned as a child to really accommodate and adapt to today's situations, right? So for me, it was about understanding human behavior. I needed
Mhm.
to understand why people did the thing that they do. I'm a
Yeah.
very logical person. So when illogic things come up, I'm like, no, that makes no sense to me. I
Yeah.
need to understand why we're doing this and why are we hurting ourselves and why are we hurting our children? And most times recognizing that it's not intentional, right? It really
Mhm.
is just we don't know. We don't
Yeah.
understand what that does. And for development, we really don't understand how that impacts us moving forward, particularly as our brains are developing, our executive
Mhm.
functioning is coming into play. So it needed that level of education for me. One, to keep it even understand my experiences and circumstances and the things that I did that
Yeah.
now I understand it for myself. I
Okay.
understand it for past family members. I also understand it for my children. So I get to respond differently. I get to react differently. Does
Hmm.
not mean I don't deal still with depression and anxiety.
Right, right.
I can understand it and I can adapt in ways so that I am better to manage it.
Yeah.
So I think that that's the driving force, right? It was really just kind of understanding that, and I wanted to learn that through psychology. So, got my undergraduate in psychology, I got my master's in mental health counseling, and really working with
Okay.
abnormal psychology.
Mhm.
And then unfortunately, I got burned out. So it
Mm.
was doing that day-to-day care. I did lots of intensive home therapy.
Yeah.
And that in itself. So here's the thing. This is from my practitioners. When
Uh-huh.
you are not healed from your trauma and you're trying to heal
Mhm.
someone else for their trauma, there's that indirect. We call it transference, right? But we don't really talk about what that looks like and the impact that has on our well-being. But
Mhm.
it had one for me. So, as being a young mom, I had three small children, really trying to maneuver what that looked like. It became too much for me. And I had to take a step back. For me, it was could I still offer the work? Absolutely. Could I still be objective? Yes, but I was numb and it
Mhm.
wasn't as authentic and it wasn't as
Mm.
engaging and it wasn't fair to the populations that I was serving. So, went back to school, got my MBA, and really started focusing on management, nonprofit leadership, and
Mhm.
and really thinking of ways that I can take my past education and experience. And then I decided I'm going to be an advocate. I worked at
Ah.
state government and realized advocates get a lot done when they can scream. And now
Mhm.
that I have this background of understanding state government, because that's a whole nother boat by itself, it shifted my role to look at more of that nonprofit leadership, but
Mhm.
also how to be a mental health advocate in authentic ways and be able to have these conversations with people to
Mhm.
have intentional change when we think about health equity and behavioral health access. So,
Mhm.
um, in 2017, I was the ED for Mental Health America.
Mhm.
But I also met Shanti Das, who is the founder and CEO of Silence to Shame.
Yeah.
And I was just enamored by the fact that I see this Black woman utilizing her platform to talk about mental health. And here I am, been fighting the sticks and
Whole
everything,
time.
trying to just get people to open up and
Yeah.
share and to recognize we all deal with this. And here she is being fully transparent. And really pulling people in, right? And giving folks permission to say it's okay not to be okay, right? I know that theme has been driving a lot of times, but see, we didn't have that a lot in our vulnerable
Mm-mm.
communities because we didn't have time not to be okay. We just
Exactly.
had to keep going.
Exactly.
So she paused and she gave that pause for people. And for me, that was something I was like, I want to follow that. I want to make sure that that can continue to be amplified and really resonate with people. So taking my background and mixing it with her
Exactly.
vulnerability and transparency. I worked with her as her board chair and really helping her to build up the foundation and
Mhm.
nonprofit, creating just structure around it, giving programmatic and evaluation so that there's a way that we are measuring the impact in a lot of our vulnerable communities. One, to acknowledge that there is a public health emergency when
Yeah.
it comes
Exactly.
to suicide, when it comes to mental illness, and we think about how people are accessing services through juvenile justice or through the
Mhm.
correctional systems and through reunification. So there are so many of these other ways that why can't we just get access like everybody else, right? Why can't we ensure that we're talking with our doctors about our mental health and that it's not a sign of weakness and that we are still caring for our whole self because we only got one body, one brain, and everything else. So
Mhm,
if we
mhm.
think that our mental health does not impact everything we do, then we don't quite understand what mental health is. So taking that and really kind of forging forward and even working at Mental Health America of Georgia,
Mhm.
I had a chance to have a voice and I was an advocate and really pushing for policies. But then I also
Uh-huh.
realized we're still missing in
Yeah.
this equation.
Yes. We
And
as Black people, right?
as Black people, we are
Exactly.
missing from the tables, from the conversations, from the policies, and all of these things are happening around us, and we don't understand that it is directly impacting our abilities to have access to high quality education, to have access to healthcare systems
Mhm.
outside of mental health, but ensuring that in
Right.
our rural settings and even in our urban settings where we think transportation is available, it really isn't,
It's not
right?
available. The access isn't there.
It doesn't exist. So working with silence to shame, it's
Mhm.
heightening that. It's elevating that message and building a grassroots of advocates to bring more awareness, to give people permission, and to develop ways so that we are accessing healthcare in any other way, in any other community, no matter where we are, we can get the help and the support that we so deserve.
That is absolutely amazing. It sounds like you are helping many, many, many people. And you did mention that, we might have our own traumas, we might have our own mental illness or whatever is going on. So that's why it's important for us to take care of our own health so that we can be there for others, whether it's through our job or through parenting or whatever aspect of our lives. So it's really good for our listeners to understand that. Like, take care of yourself. And I'm
Oh,
always
yeah.
pushing self care and that kind of thing. So what do you do as far as your own self-care to be able to keep being present and available in your job and in your family?
Yeah, one day at a time, y'all. Let's talk about that because I think when we try to think of the vast scheme, oh, I'm going to do this and do that. What am I going to get done today? So
That's good.
present, being mindful. And
Mm,
someone who has anxiety, let me tell you, mindfulness is the hardest thing you can ever do because it's easy to get stuck in all of the what should I have done? What didn't I do? Can I get this
overthinking.
done? Oh, yeah, and revisiting whatever conversations that may have happened or thinking about things that we say, and I'm pretty vocal. So I do think about a lot of things that I can
That you
say
say.
and the interpretation of that because I cannot control the way people interpret the things that I say. So it is important to remind myself to be present. I do a lot of self-talk, a lot of conversations, and yes,
That's
I may
good.
respond to myself. Does not mean that I'm crazy.
Hey,
This
that's
means
fine. We don't use the
I'm
word
the
crazy.
Oh, we don't, because we have the best conversations with ourselves and say, you know what? Maybe we should change this. You're right. Maybe we should, because this is not working for us in any kind of way. So it's also just thinking about like who we are as individuals, right? And that little voice inside of us is not always our voice of reason. Sometimes it's the leading or misleading voices that, you're not good enough or you're not doing enough or you're not being the
Mhm.
best mom you can be or the best leader you can be. And sometimes it's like, you know what? I think I'm doing just great. Um,
Exactly. We need those positive affirmations.
all of that. So I am constant with that and am constantly reminding myself of my purpose in this space and allowing myself to take up as much space as I need to. But I am also one who needs my me time. So
Mhm.
taking time for
Same.
myself, self-care is important.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I try to find a little bit of self-care every single day. And it
Good.
might just mean I'm just not going to respond to that text message or I'm not going to pick up that
Nice.
phone. I'm,
Boundaries.
I'm going to cancel that meeting. Like sometimes you got to know that not today, right? And
And
it's
not feel bad about
okay.
it. Sorry, not sorry.
That mom guilt will kill you guys
Oh,
too. And then let me tell you, because
oh,
the
yeah.
babies can make you feel like, oh, you need to do all of these things. And I have to tell my babies too, like, not today. Mommy's off today. So we're going to take some time for me.
And is that even possible? Because being a mother means 24/7.
24/7. And my kids are not babies. I have a 20-year-old,
I was
an
gonna say.
18-year-old, and a
I
15-year-old.
was gonna say yours aren't babies like mine
They're
are. You
not
actually
babies.
can take a day off,
I can't
maybe.
take a day off. Trust me, no. If I had a 2 and a 4 and a no, 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 absolutely not. You cannot take those days off. So that's why I say, you know,
Hence my
taking no
overwhelms.
I will say they grow up. That's has been my inspiration to parents. They grow up and it's okay.
Well, and that's
But
my guilt because it's like I want them to grow up, but I want to be present and cherish the moment. I'm like, "You know what? You're gonna grow up really fast, and I'm gonna turn around, and you're gonna be a
you're gonna be
25-year-old."
gone. But I also want you to see when it's time to take space for myself. I
Oh,
want you
yeah.
to see for you to understand that adults don't have it all together. We are struggling sometimes. We don't have all the answers. And I try to be, and I've always tried to be as open and honest with my children, even with my diagnosis, dealing with depression and dealing with anxiety. Anxiety for me is not just I'm anxious all the time. It's a lot. There are a lot of behaviors that come into place, a lot of reactions and
Mhm,
overreactions. And it's like, how do I have those conversations with my family and my loved ones so they are not taking offense when I may be experiencing something, right? It's not them. It's everything that's happening inside of me that you cannot see. Those invisible illnesses can be the
mhm.
most detrimental. But all again, other people are interpreting is that you're not being your best version to me. And I don't feel
Right.
that's fair. So I
Yeah.
think, doing that, recognizing when I'm not being the best version of me,
Uh-huh.
recognizing when I need to take a step back, that's
Mhm.
also a part of my self-care. And to your point, those boundaries that I put
Mhm.
into play. So, and then just the normal things outside. I just sometimes getting some sun, it feels great. Sometimes I'm a workaholic, so I do have to push the laptop away and make sure I just
Especially
go
if you work
outside.
remotely.
Which is even harder because you can stay in that chair and you be fighting just to go to
Yeah.
the bathroom. It's like it's 2 steps, Jewel.
Yeah,
Just
even
get
though
up and
that's
go.
what's right there for me.
It's like, just go. So
Right,
I
right.
think all of those things is something that and it's never just one thing. And I think sometimes people are like, well, this doesn't work anymore. Try something else. Like whatever it is, my one thing every day is I wash away the day every day. So I might take 30 or 40 minutes in a
Gotcha,
bathroom,
literally. I was gonna say what you meant, but sound
literally.
fast. Nice.
And just wash away everything that happened for that day just to feel like a restart. Those things I think has really just helped me support my mental well-being. And then your social support is key. My family is my strength. They are my anchor. They
Yeah.
are the ones who
Social
accept
connection.
me. Oh yeah, in any aspect of it. And I'll tell them today ain't a good day, and they're like, "You're right, it ain't,
Yeah.
but it's all right. We still love you."
Yeah, knowing those key words or phrases that you have to tell people and just
Yeah.
being upfront with, "Hey, it's not a good day." That's good. Because you mentioned invisible mental illness, although there are some outward signs that you may be able to notice, but that's the thing about mental illness that it's inside, it's internal, it's invisible. So therefore people might stay silent. They might stay silent because of the shame or because of the stigma. So for you, since you're talking about your own personal experience with mental illness, did stigma ever stop you? Like, and if it did, how did you break through that?
Stigma stops me every day, right? Like, I think that's what just because you understand the stigma does not mean that you can actively combat it daily, right? Um, we think about stigma internally. It's like, what happens when I acknowledge that I have a depression or if I have
Mhm.
anxiety or a mental illness? And it's so
Yeah.
many different things. One, I get two different aspects. Oh, you don't look sick to me. I'm not
Mhm.
really sure how that's supposed to look.
'Cause you're
Uh,
functioning well.
because I'm very high functioning, extremely high functioning, does
Ah,
not mean I don't slowly die inside. So just because you can
gotcha.
put this face on doesn't mean that things aren't hard from day to day. So that's the internal stigma that
Yeah.
sometimes, and I do, it's like I put this face on to make other people feel better. Doesn't mean this face is what I feel like every single day. But because people need to feel better and not feel like, oh, I don't think I want to be in this illness with you, I got to put it on so that we can just get through whatever interaction we have to get through. So I still have some of that, and even some of the spaces that I talk to, that you still have to deal with how people are going to perceive you. Because if you tell someone, they're like, "Oh my, what's going on, and what does this look like?" And it's like it looked like the same thing before I told you. It's like I'm still dealing
Mhm.
with it
Look
every
at that.
single day. So it doesn't change who I am. It just make you aware that there's just more to me than what you originally thought to, for it to be. So I think it's in that piece. And then the public stigma is still very real, right?
Yeah,
So it is this constantly going against the grain because we all want to believe that everything is always okay and we're going to be fine because that's what makes things easier. When things are complicated and difficult and requires constant change, we try to shy away from it, even as a community, because it's too much. We don't want to feel that much and
yeah.
I don't want to have to adjust how to talk with you and how to manage with you. So it's like I'd rather just not know and I can just do whatever I want to do,
Mhm.
right? But that public stigma still exists and it's still trying to combat some of that. And even in my own family, like I'm like, y'all see this, but yet I still have to explain it to you every single day because
Right,
there's the disconnect of, well, I don't really know what you feel and I don't need you to. I just need you to understand that I am feeling this and I am
right.
experiencing this. And the best way sometimes is just to be there, or maybe I'm just going to take a step back. Whatever
Right.
makes you feel comfortable as an individual. And then that societal stigma, I mean, it's all in our institutions, right?
Yeah,
Healthcare, accessing that,
yeah,
having those policies. It is still a fight to talk about mental health in political settings because it's become political when all it
yeah,
is our healthcare. Like it's
literally.
how I think, I feel, and behave. And all I'm asking is to have resources and access to those resources so that I can be the best version of myself every day. So if I need to take a mental health day at work, then why do
It
you
should be allowed.
penalize me? Right.
Yeah.
Oh, you got to take a sick day and you got to come back with a note. Well, I mean, what do you want me to say? I was depressed for 3 days. Like, I don't know how you want me to respond to that. So I think too, even in my vast understanding of what stigma looks like and what we have to deal with, and even my fight every single day to find a way to talk about it, to
You literally
engage
do.
people, to empower communities to talk about it, the stigma is so big. It
Mhm.
is that elephant. And what we do is you take it one bite at a
I was
time.
gonna say we just have to chip away at it just a
Chip
little bit at a
away.
time with things like this. And you mentioned like
Hmm.
mental illness being a sign of weakness. We know in the Black community, there's the religious thing. Oh, just pray about
Pray it
it. God
away.
got you. There's
Hmm.
just so many layers from the personal internal layer to the political to society. That's so important. Now, as far as what Silence of Shame has been doing, are there any stories that silence of shame has been able to impact someone in overcoming stigma?
Yeah, and I think that's what we do every single day.
Yeah.
Like we exist to eliminate mental health stigma, empower and enhance communities and families to really understand that yes, this thing is, right?
Mhm.
But it doesn't mean we don't do anything about it. I can say I have depression, but then what are you doing about it? Right? Are you
Yeah,
going to therapy or are you making sure that you're connecting with people to help you? It's like, yeah, we may
right.
have dealt with trauma, but if we don't take those next steps, see, now
Uh-huh.
that's the combat of stigma. It's like helping people to say, okay, I can do this next thing. And it is constant for us, because of this conversation that Silence to Shame held on, I now go to therapy. I now seek out, medication to manage some of my symptoms. I talk with my families about it. I've let go of that toxic relationship because of that, because I realize my value is more than what I have given to myself in other places. It's like that the power of talking is
Yeah.
just so valuable, right? And a lot of times we'll say, oh, we don't talk about mental health. We talk about it every day to your friends, to your family. Oh, I don't feel good. This ain't right. I can't do
That's mental
that's
yeah,
all
that's
mental
mental health.
health,
Yeah.
right? I was like, so we ain't really ashamed to talk about it. We're ashamed to do something about it.
Ooh, that's good. We're
And
not
so it's,
ashamed to
it's
talk about it, we're ashamed to do
do
something about it.
something. Yes. So how do we get people to do something about their mental health? It's not just
Wow.
saying that, oh, I just want to do that. And that's what we try to do. Like we offer self-care socials. Like we give you an
Right.
opportunity to practice self-care. That could be yoga, that could
Yeah.
be meditation, that could be
Mhm.
a Zumba or a boot camp, or
Right.
sometimes running. Yes, sometimes it's doing health screens or sometimes it's just building a garden, whatever it does to allow you to make you feel good. We try to promote self-care, and it's probably the easiest thing you can do that, healthcare isn't accessible. Like that's the
Yeah.
reality of it. Would we like for it to be? Absolutely. But it's not. And that is what the hard truth is. And even in the accessibility is inaccessible because if we ourselves don't recognize
Uh-huh.
we need mental health support, well, then we're still not accessing those
There
resources.
it is. Recognizing it and knowing it exists and being willing to do something about it, and then knowing the resources to be able to do something about it.
And that's what we do for Silence to Shame to combat that stigma. It is one step, one conversation, one meme, because we even use social media. Like, what are you pouring into your
Yeah.
head? It's like, am I just watching the shade room and seeing what gossip is happening? Or am I taking some empowerment so that I can feel what my brain needs up with the inspiration, the affirmation, the education I
Mhm.
need in order to feel better about my day to day. And I think,
Exactly.
even with our transparency, that's what we've
Mhm.
really modeled ourselves on is just being transparent in that moment. It doesn't matter how much money we have. Like what we've learned in working with Shanti
Yeah.
because of her background in the
Uh-huh.
industry is that mental illness does not discriminate. It doesn't matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter where
Color,
your
your class.
status is. None
Yeah.
of that. And it's
Religion.
like that. And we have to recognize how
Sure.
alcohol, substances,
Mhm.
all of that is just making things worse. And it really seems like it's coping, right? Because I feel good, after I have a glass of wine, but it's a
In
depressant.
the yeah, in the immediate moment,
Yeah.
but
In the
over
moment.
time, it's a depressant. It makes you more
Yeah.
depressed or more anxious or
All of that.
sleepless nights, and then you're
That.
dependent on it.
Because
Yeah.
you wake up more when you're drinking alcohol. And you're like, "Oh, I sleep well." No, you didn't. You just slept. But doesn't mean you slept well. Was it a good quality of sleep? Is your brain energized? Like, what are we actually doing these things for? And it is to be optimal health. So if we're adding other things that we think is helping, it really does just kind of make things look worse. So, but it's about that
Mhm.
education. I'm not telling you stop drinking, right? I'm just saying, just be
Right.
aware.
But some people, they don't have to stop drinking. Yeah, it just all
You
depends.
don't.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely, but it's if you're already depressed, drinking probably is not gonna make it better. That's just a good way to think about try exercising. 30 minutes of that probably would do better for your mental health than having a couple of beers after work. The social
And if you're
connection, this
on
could be good.
true, right, and if you're on medication, talk to your doctor about it first. Don't just stop your medication so that you can have a drink.
Yeah, and then even
Important.
recognizing medications,
Yeah.
like, it is not a cure. I know we would love to just take that pill and everything looks great.
Yeah, like a magic pill. It's
Ooh,
not.
I'm looking for it. But you're right. It's the work that we put into our own well-being. It's, how are we feeding our bodies? How
Mhm.
are we exercising our
All of
bodies,
that. Yep.
stretching, and how are we stimulating our brain? Because, when we think about mental illness, I'm a sandwich generation where I'm a mom and I'm also caring for my parents.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
um,
goodness. So sandwich generation. Okay. I like that
yeah,
verbiage.
yes,
That's
that's
where we're
that's
at too, my husband and I.
yeah.
Taking care of both.
Yeah, exactly. And the challenge, we don't talk about that either. It's like that's a lot because you have to deal with the grief and loss of your aging parents and where that looks like for you and still
Mhm.
trying to be aspirational and motivational for your children to live fruitful lives. And the caregiver role is difficult. So
Oh, yeah.
just understanding what that looks like and what I found in which I already knew, in books, right?
Mhm.
That the aging and loneliness and the increase of that and what that does to you. I've now learned about the healthcare settings and how they treat the elderly and how they
Oh,
get their needs unmet and not
right.
really met. And they become check boxes. And
Exactly.
we don't understand just how that, impacts our mental health. So it's not just that certain parts of our lives is our entire life.
Mhm.
that we have to pay attention to our well-being and our engagements, our relationships, our
Mhm.
aspirations, because you get to a point, especially when dementia starts kicking in, where,
Yeah,
all of those other things that's been able to keep you going no longer exist. And now you're not able to do the things that used to give you joy. So depression does set in and you feel
literally.
hopeless and
I mean, it's
helpless and
like
you're
finding a new life and finding new things in your current status because as you do grow older and not being able to do certain things because of depression, it may be because physically you can't do those things anymore. So just
absolutely.
having a new baseline for yourself and a new life, basically. Some people
And I think
reinvent themselves later in life.
right, right. Starting new things, but also realizing sometimes how hard that can be, especially if you've
Mhm.
had a career that's defined you for so long that
Mhm.
you're no longer associated with. So, with Sinus of Shame, we look at all of those different perspectives. We
Nice.
look at the aging population. We
Yeah.
look at culturally, we think about churches and faith
Uh-huh.
institutions and educating them and giving them the tools to say, absolutely pray about it, but still go to the doctor, right?
Right. Right. Because
Um,
we take all those aspects, the medication, the therapy, but also all those other things you named about like exercise and walking and eating and sleeping healthily, but having those religious institutions or sororities or whatever social connected group that you're a part of. So we need our communities, but
we
it's all of
absolutely.
that. It's not just the one thing.
It's not. It's not. And I think we try to pull those resources together to say, yes, healthcare is an absolute. Treatment is absolutely,
Right.
helpful, supportive, and needed, especially as we're recovering. But there are some things that you can do too, and making sure that you feel connected to that. And even if you don't feel you have that, we try to give people a voice. Having people to share their stories, talk about their
Yeah.
experiences, to be more empowering to others because of that peer support is so strong. And sometimes we just focused on those who are severely mentally ill, but we
Mhm.
again have a full spectrum of mental health,
The
right?
spectrum. Correct.
And we want to highlight that spectrum and really focus more on mental wellness. What are those
Mhm.
things that we can do to stay mentally well? It doesn't mean that it's without illness, because you can be mentally well with a mental illness. It's how you're caring for it, right?
That's
So
really
it's
important to know the difference. I mean, that's really
Mhm.
good, and to know that you can have both. That's good.
Absolutely. And you could not have a mental illness and still be doing very poorly for your mental health, right?
Yeah.
So
And
I
resilience, resilience. I try to preach resilience because we also, especially this new generation, I guess the Gen Z or whoever's below them, it's kind of like, well,
Mhm.
I'm not supposed to have challenges. I'm not supposed to have stress. I'm not supposed to have failures. Well, let's embrace it as a time to grow and become stronger. And then you're ready when it comes. It may knock you down, but hey, you can still win.
And I think we miss that aspect in
Yeah.
schools when we talk about social skills and bouncing back from things that seem harmful or hurtful. But yeah, that resilience is important. And to even amplify that even more, especially even for my generation, to look about all the things that you have accomplished and have made come or gone through or overcome. Like, don't negate the fact that you have survived every single situation up until this point, and you will continue to do so because of the resilience that you've had from those experiences. So, but we got to remind ourselves of that because we
We
forget.
do.
We forget because we are moms and we're caregivers and we're employers or we're leaders, and we forget that we're human and
Mm,
that we can be who we need to be in the moments that we need to be. So I feel that's what I feel like we do a good job of, and trying to get people to own that without that shame, right? It is
yeah.
peeling back those layers and just seeing who you are as a core person. And you are a beautiful human being, no matter all of the things that have been thrown at you. And I do ask you to heal, right? Because that's
Mhm.
something where
You have to
we
process it.
continue to I think I heard the other day, instead of breaking generational curses, it's
Uh-huh.
starting generational cycles where it is more about empowerment. It's more about business making. It's more about traveling, instead of
Love
the
it.
the mundane of what we're trying to stop doing. But what are we starting to do so that it shifts where,
Yeah.
you can't solve generational curses because it's
That's true.
generational.
It's
But
generational. 'Cause,
yes,
yeah, if your focus is on all that stopping, then you're getting drained, and then you're gonna end up failing because you just can't do it, and that's all your focus is on. It's kinda like how like, with depression and you have these negative thoughts, I can't just tell you, "Stop thinking negatively." You're just gonna
right.
think about the negative stuff, but you feel that with those positive thoughts, so that's the same thing, so that's really good as far as, like, starting something new. What are we gonna
Starting
start as
something
opposed
new.
to trying to stop? 'Cause as you
Right.
start these things, it'll probably stop on its own.
And that's to me is the key point is that when you start doing these things, we no longer have to feel in this place to continue to perpetuate that. So I thought that was something, it was very, again, TikTok, but I thought it was still a moment of where,
Yeah.
you know what, you're absolutely right. We keep trying to break things that,
Yeah.
I even think about my parents. My parents are baby boomers. I cannot get them to really invest into mental health because in their
Or physical
lifetime,
health for that matter.
right,
I know you're gonna
exactly.
listen to this, mom.
Right, exactly. Well, she won't, but I know, it's thinking about my dad's 85 years old. Like, I'm not gonna get him to all of a sudden start doing all of these things, but can
Yeah.
I educate him on it? Yes, I can. So it's to for me, my generational start was to talk about mental health. It runs all through my family, all through mental illness, depression, anxiety, and it's severe. But we never talked about it. And so this time I'm saying, "Oh, we're gonna talk about it."
So how do you get that? You mentioned severe mental illness, and I have severe mental illness in my family as well. So it's like, how do you convince a family member, like, take medication, go to the hospital, continue your therapy so you won't end up in the hospital? It's really tough. And even as a mental health professional, I find that difficult to convince those family members.
It is. I usually try the model of lead by example.
Yeah.
Oftentimes,
Yep.
my dad suffers from severe anxiety, and it took a while because he wouldn't acknowledge it, but he's just now realizing, "Oh, this is bad," right?
Okay.
And so but what I do is I model and I normalize it for me and my family, for my immediate family anyway,
Yeah.
like, so for me, I was like, Dad, when I get anxious, it's hard for me to be out in social settings because it becomes overwhelming and I'm so focused on just trying to get out the setting,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
when I normalize and I explain it to him, then he's just like, "Oh, yeah, you know what? You're right." And I'm like, Dad, you haven't slept in a few days. Maybe we
That's
can try
good.
that medication so that you can better sleep." But it's not a force, and it would have
Can't.
never
Can't force
been.
them
Not
until
at
it gets
all.
to the point where you have to force them
Yeah.
because it gets that bad, unfortunately. But for the most part, no, you can't force it.
You can't. And I mean, you can even have the involuntary commitment.
And
You
that's what I
can
mean when I say that.
involuntary commitment can
Thank you
happen
for spelling
over
that out.
and over and over again, does not mean they're gonna change.
That's
Because if
true. Because
they
while they're in
don't
the hospital on that involuntary commitment, maybe they're forced to take meds, maybe, but when they're discharged, they still have their own choice.
they do.
And so it's an everyday commitment, every day just being there to support them.
And that's why you have the recidivism rate that is usually high. And if they don't end up in a hospital, then they'll end up in jail or they end up in other some type of homelessness. But it's like it's one of those things it's you have to embrace it yourself. And
Mhm.
my
Mhm.
only thing and only role that I ever try to play is just to give you the education around it. I and again, I have done it when I was a therapist. I've had to 1013, clients, but
Yeah.
at the end of the day, one, it usually was never a good outcome. Most times, young people, they are 1013 and they end up picking up more habits that they shouldn't pick up while they're there because then
Oh,
they're
yeah,
starting
that's
to
what
trade
parents
secrets.
fear too, or family
Mhm.
members fear that. Like, well, what if they're worse? What if it's a traumatizing experience? And, the hospitals aren't perfect.
They're not. They're absolutely not. And our children manifest and deal with things very differently. For them, it's a rejection. You couldn't deal with me, so you had to get somebody else to deal with me. It's just so many layers that you have to pull through. So there's never just this one answer that's going to fix
No.
it. And this is why so many families fight to support their loved ones. But at the end of the day, if that's not the space or the readiness that they are in, you're just keep fighting with yourself. It's
Yeah,
just like
kinda
you are
wait and be
talking to
there.
that wall, right? You're watching that paint dry, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it until it's done. And
Yeah.
But it is about being there. It's about supporting them. It's about normalizing it for them. It's about,
That's really
not
good.
saying that something's wrong with you. It's just saying that, we deal with things differently. It's
Yeah.
how you are conversing with them. How are you connecting with them? How are you
Really good.
educating them? And how are you educating yourself? And most times that's where the disconnect is. And people can't embrace the treatment. They can't embrace the recovery because all they keep embracing is something is wrong with me. And I'm going to prove you wrong that there's nothing wrong with me. But then I keep
Mm.
digging this hole deeper for myself to realize I can no longer get out because when I needed to just reach up and just say, yes, help me, nobody gave me the empathy I needed to feel safe to say, help me.
Yeah, to
And
be
I think,
vulnerable.
oh, yeah. But a lot of times our
Yeah.
families don't know how to allow us to be vulnerable because they just want to fix it, right?
Yeah,
That's our
or
goal.
parents might even say, or family might be even say, "Oh, no, there's nothing wrong with you. No, 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 don't say that," because 'cause they're scared and they don't know what to do. They don't have the education or resources to be able to comfort or educate their own family members. So, there's that too. So, you have to manage your own fears, surrounding mental illness.
Yes,
A
yes.
big,
So
huge
we do.
cycle.
We offer mental wellness cope clinics.
Oh, nice. I
We
was literally just gonna ask you what tools and resources you have as, silence the
Science is,
shame.
yeah, we do. We do cope clinics, and these are just immersive
Okay.
experience for young people to do
Mhm.
two things: to learn more about their mental well-being, practice self-care, but also to amplify their voice in it. We
Nice.
have team panelists come out and they speak their truth, and it's always just a welcoming insight because
Mhm.
parents see it and hear it differently because
Uh-huh.
they realize, the things that I've been doing to my child has been hurting them,
Yeah.
not helping them because I keep pushing them to be successful, but I just keep telling them things to do instead of listening to what they
Yeah.
actually need. And that's usually the aha moment that a lot of our parents have and a lot of our families experience when they hear from the teens, and it's not necessarily their teen, but it's a teen that they can hear that, what, I think I do the same thing, and I,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm not, treating your mental health as something that is not valuable or that you are not valuable.
That's good. Teaching the
So
parents too.
yes. So we do that through our parent cafes and we talk about
Oh, parent cafes and
resilience.
co-clinics. Okay.
Yes. So our parent cafes engage our parents. We utilize licensed practitioners just to help guide the conversation,
Nice.
but it's
Are they
really just peer
free?
support.
The resource is free? I imagine insurance doesn't cover,
No, all of this
but
is
it's free,
prevention.
so
Right, right. Insurance doesn't pay for prevention like that. That's unfortunate. But
yeah.
yes, so we are funded through grants and just, generous donors in order to host these clinics, in order to offer these parent cafes. And to your point, yes, we want to make sure that it is offered to our communities at no cost to them. So, shameless plug, text to gives the word silence 70707070, just in case you all want to help
Nice.
support that. But, it is about, ensuring, but even for our adults, our community conversations, we have conversations in care where we have panel discussions from experts and influencers just to help people normalize their
That's
experiences,
awesome.
but also ensuring that people know that there is help out there. We try to connect community to community. We know the behavioral health
Gotcha.
professionals out there, but they may not know. So we want to bridge that gap so we can say that it may not always be going to your therapist, but it could be supporting, doing a support group or engaging in volunteer opportunities, coming to conversations like this,
Right.
hosting events like this. We just finished or we're finishing our college ambassador cohort where we're teaching
Uh-huh.
college students to be ambassadors to talk about mental health and host events on campus for our young people. Because a lot of times you hit college and you're like, life is a lot. And I was
Yeah.
not expecting
Yeah,
all of
that
this.
transition, any transition period. That's really
Oh,
good for the college kids.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we try to take it just different approaches. Like, what is
Mhm.
that way to connect a community where you can hear the message, and we amplify it through social media. It's always about making sure you can hear the
Mhm.
voices, you can hear the stories, and it's about making sure that people understand what that looks like. The
Mhm.
individual testimonies, the community testimonies, our partnerships are pivotal to make sure that we can connect people wherever we can. Um, so that we don't even have to stay, right? It's really about, do you know what's available to you and how can we change the things that we
Yeah.
do? So that's just kind of our work, right? And it is
Uh,
just one day at a time. And but we love to see when community make those connections, right? When
That's
they
really
can.
good. Definitely love what you guys are doing for our community. People need to know more about it. So as we close, and you've really been so transparent talking about your own personal experience, and I thank you for that. So Journey to Joy Live, that's the name of the podcast. I always talk about, getting on that journey to joy, whatever that looks like for you. What would you say your personal journey to joy looks like? And what does that mean to you?
Advocacy is always that. So always being able to have that opportunity to talk and share
Yeah.
and to normalize for people. I realize I didn't always have to do therapy, which I think sometimes therapy hinders me from saying what I can say
Oh,
versus being an educator and
yeah.
helping people to see things from different perspectives without singling you out, like, which is what you're doing wrong, right? And I think therapy is more that individual work, which you absolutely need. I
Yeah.
do not do therapy. Go to therapy, y'all. Even if there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong, go to therapy. Have someone else to talk through whatever it is that you're
Yeah.
going through.
Mhm.
So I do think that's my journey for sure, is that I can continue to educate our communities, empower our communities,
Yes,
um,
empowerment, resilience, yes.
and just my personal mission is to ensure that we can create safe spaces for anyone. My personal mission is my children,
Yeah.
that they can feel, in spite of having a mental illness, that they can thrive in every aspect of their
Yeah.
lives. And I want to see that for every child and every individual, every adult, that no matter what you may be experiencing, you still have everything you need to be enough for everything you need to do.
Ooh, that's a perfect way to end. I love it. Great, great, great. Thank you so much for joining the Journey to Joy Live podcast, Jewel. Really appreciate you.
Oh, I love it. Thank you so much again for having me. I love this kind of the concept that you're pushing out there, and we need to
Mhm.
hear more about it. So, again, follow us at Silence the Shame. Please check out on all of our social medias. If you are or someone you know experiencing a crisis, you can text the word silence to 741-741, and that is just a texting to a professional. And then you always have 988 when you need to connect with someone and you're experiencing a mental health crisis. But then you have Dr. Joy here, who is going to be that professional out there for you. So I encourage you all, for your journey to joy, making sure you find all of those different elements to support your well being, because you deserve it.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me so much.